Well, but do identify yourselves when you do speak, since we're not doing the intro stuff. Want to welcome everyone that is viewing our Cincinnati School Board Budget, Finance, Growth Committee. Today, we meet monthly, and we have a full house because finance is at the heart of everything. So we're here, and I'm Eve Bolton, and the two committee members are
Brandon Craig, board member.
Jim Crossett, board member.
our treasurer
Michael Gustin, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
and superintendent.
Good day, Shauna Murphy.
Thank you very much, and everybody welcome there and also welcome here, and we're going to go through this agenda with all our wonderful experts. Mr. Treasurer, will you introduce our first efforts?
Yes, our first topic will be under old business. It's a follow-up on gifts, donation, crowdfunding, and financial reporting. So going to be joined by Chief Audit Executive Haverkas and Assistant Legal Counsel Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel. So Rob, if you would go in the slide deck to slide 51, sir. And this is a follow-up from our discussion at last month's budget and finance. And so there were some questions about how donations are kind of accounted for, how they're recognized, those sort of things. So I want to thank my peers for a lot of research, especially Chief Audit Executive. She put a lot of time into researching this. And so just wanted to go through really high level. Okay, Rob, if you can go back about. There we go. Okay, so through the beauty of AI, we've got lots of images now, so this is fun. So first scenario to talk about is a simple cash donation. So if you're a person who wants to give a cash donation to the district for any purpose, you'll give that money to CPS to get to the schoolhouse. It's going to end up in probably one of two funds. So if you give a donation to a school to be used at the discretion of the principal, that goes into what's called the principal fund. That is our Fund 18. And it can be used at the discretion of the principal. If you give money for a very specific purpose, that's going to go into our Fund 19, which is, we call it other local grants. And the district will do our absolute best to honor the wishes of that purpose. So if I want to give $100 to Roll Hill, so the principal can do at her discretion, she can go do whatever. If I instead wanted to give $100 to buy, I don't know, rewards for the kids who pass their third grade reading proficiency, then money would go to that. It's pretty simple. It comes in as revenue on our books. So it says in the revenue into one of those funds. And then as the money is spent, it shows as expense in our books. If you go to the next slide, Rob, is if you want to give items. So in this case, if you want to give school supplies or you want to buy items, you buy those. We have an acceptance procedure and policy that involves the board accepting it. If you look in the treasurer's report on any given board meeting, you'll see there's a section specifically for donations. And so that's where the board officially accepts those donations. Obviously, things are looked at to make sure they fit with what we're doing here, especially technology, as Mr. Gallahue can attest to. And if it's something that is an asset, it's tagged as an asset, and then it's tracked as an asset, and those things become property of the district. But there's no recognition as far as revenue expense in the books, but they're recognized as in-kind or asset donations. And then the third slide is if you add in a non-school organization. So if in a non-school organization, could be a PTO, could be a Friends of group, could be any of those things. If you give that organization money, then they are going to, because they're separate from the district, using their rules, guidelines, policies, bylaws, decide what to do to that. They could buy goods, and those goods could get donated to the district, or they can make a monetary donation. And at that point, it's going to follow the same two flows at the beginning. So next slide kind of sums that up. One thing we did change when we redid the gifts, donations, bequests policy last year, we just put a threshold for recognizing gifts in the Treasury report of $250. That aligns with IRS reporting rules, so it puts us together there. And I think that kind of summarizes all of those things. Which might be a good spot to stop and see if there are any questions so far.
Okay, very good. Does anyone up here, board members, have any questions about what's been presented? I do. There are, as a matter of fact, just recently, there sometimes is I won't call it a dispute, but a discussion between the LSDMC and a principal regarding Fund 18 versus Fund 19, as you point out. Some things that get raised at the school level that the LSDMC people might think needs to be more broadly interpreted or has a specific purpose, but the principal takes it to that. In that case, what's the administrative guidelines or ideas for handling such discussion?
I've been involved in a couple of those disputes over the course.
There's some that are out there now brewing.
Yes. I strongly advise the parties to come to a workable solution.
Because
Strongly, I think the relationship between a principal, their ILT and their LSDMC is a huge thing that really makes the schoolhouse run well. And when all three of those groups are on the same page, you just get such better outcomes because of the efficiency. When they're all rowing in the same direction, it takes a lot of unnecessary issues out of. So I always try to get people to work it out without involving any of us. Generally, I will send them back to the superintendent side of the house. I don't feel that the treasurer really should get involved in those sort of things. We try to stay focused on the money and those sort of things. Superintendent might want to add.
Thank you, Treasurer. So I have had times where this has come up, and I always ask to go back to the meeting notes, whether it is, the LSDMC, a parent organization who may be fundraising on behalf of the school, and at the onset of the decision to raise funds or receive, what did the meeting notes say we were going to do, and what was the purpose going to be? And generally speaking, that kind of clears things up.
Okay, Mr. Craig?
I was going to say, I think this also is another reason, and again, I think we talk about this a little bit more in an audit committee versus necessarily here, but for having some greater, whether it's skill training or checks and balances when it comes to how funds are received and like how dollars are being brought in to schools, because I think at that school level, there have been a lot of worlds where folks treated the school as their own, like, I run this kingdom, right? This is my space, and everything that comes to me, I do it with it as I please, and that's not how the rules are set up. And so I could see in a situation where you may have someone who intended to donate at the school level in a certain manner, that it's not clear from what we would have records of at Central of what like all those details were, because it didn't flow up the same way or didn't get communicated the same way, and just make sure all those procedures are done correctly and that those processes are operated, and in part because we don't have a treasurer at every school, right? So they may not always know the odds and ends and rules when an individual teacher or individual assistant principal or principal is the person that's like the point of contact to receiving those funds.
Yes, sir, Mr. Crossett.
Yeah, I'm just curious, when there is a dispute, wouldn't getting clarity from the donor be pretty helpful? Or is that not allowed to be part of the process?
If the donor makes their wishes known, that is kind of the first guiding star, for sure. There are times where sometimes the donor donations are kind of vague in a way. They could say, hey, we want to donate money to benefit the kids. Well, you and I could have totally different ideas of what we could purchase to benefit the kids, and those they would both, and we could get really opposed on those things. We could really dig into those things, even though both of them would benefit the kids. So it's always great, yeah.
Yeah, that's good information and helpful. I'm just wondering if it might be too difficult, but it might be interesting to have a record of some of these things so that you could identify some best practices to help with some guidelines. Just a thought.
We do keep record of donations. If the donations are made, there's a donations form. So if you donate money very specifically for something, it will be recorded there. For any of these accounts, we also require a budget plan is created every year. So that's another document that we have. As the superintendent said, there are meetings, especially at the schoolhouse. Minutes should be kept for those. So you can go back and see, who was present, who said what, all of those things. I mean, the one thing I've learned at CPS is a collaborative district. And anytime you think you're going to steamroll something through, you will most likely not be successful. I mean, I've seen just personally, not for this conversation, personally, folks in our finance office who came from other school districts where what the treasurer's office did was rule and law, and they basically would say jump and people would say how high. That is not a CPS culture thing. And those people, for the most part, were not as successful as they could have been until they learned that level of collaboration. And I think that could be said for almost everyone in administration.
Thank you.
We do not, every school, every one of our schools does have somebody that is functioning as the school treasurer, correct?
I would say
In the front
I would
office
say
or-
bookkeeper is a more accurate term, but yes, there is someone who's functioning
I'll
to
take
do the
bookkeeper.
bookkeeping. Yeah.
So is that person the person that should be, I don't want to make this a kind of have a whole bunch of people involved, but they would have, it would seem to me they'd have the responsibility also to know what was meant for that donation or that contribution.
They do a lot of things in that area. Like they have a responsibility to make sure cash or checks are dropped off, that money is properly recorded, accounted for, and deposited. They have responsibility when we go to buy something to make sure a requisition uses the right fund, the right account. They generally have responsibility to run reports of all these various funds and make sure that the money's in the right spot, make sure it's being spent, to help assist the principal and the school leadership team with those kind of duties. And then obviously we have our accountants here in central office who back them up and are always available for questions or assistance as needed.
Okay, and if some people have issues, that they can make this be a district issue by seeking some help
For sure.
from the district level instead of trying to figure it out at the school
Yes.
level. Mr. Craig?
I was just going to just add the one other thing, and I think we've talked about this in past years, is part of the other thing that comes with the confusion of donations, that someone may make a donation to something like, I want to donate to Miss Smith's third grade class. So when Miss Smith is no longer teaching the third grade class, we aren't exactly going back and doing a whole, so do you want her to go to her fourth grade class now that she's teaching fourth grade, and it can't go to her directly. And so I do think there's probably some of those things where someone may make a donation of whatever, dollars or resources or whatever the case may be, and it's maybe difficult to track based on the nature of what they were donating for may have changed. Or like teacher changes schools, does those dollars track with the teacher? Do they stay at the school? Those type of things. And I think that's the other part that might be worthwhile for us to, I think we started with some of that discussion a couple years ago, but I think it might be worthwhile at some point, if we're seeing a pattern of it, to recircle back to make sure we have some hands on some of those things. Because I think, to your point, I think that is actually, rarely do we have a donor who says specifically, like, I want to donate to this one really thing. It's usually like, I want to donate towards the group of kids. I want to donate towards this effort. I want to donate so that they have the resources at a school for something. It's rarely saying, like, give only $100 to this program and only $3 for new reeds for clarinets. that type of deal. And so I think that's the other part that might be worthwhile for us to think about if we're looking at any potential financial policy aspects of it or financial training aspects of it. It's just making sure that we're clear about what happens when situation changes.
So if you remember when we did the crowdfunding policy, we put some language in about those sort of situations, because those are the time where, because it's done as a campaign, you are donating to Miss Smith's third grade class. Because Miss Smith wants, to replenish your classroom library. So you're very specific to those things. And so we did put some language in about, where administratively feasible, we will try to follow. But also if you donate something that we have to mount into a wall or mount into the ceiling, it might not be administratively feasible to move that if Mrs. Smith moves down, 2 doors.
Well, but to follow up on that, this lends to the discussion that when we receive a donation or a contribution, we should spend it on the kids and the person and in the time that it was given, because that is a problem here. And it actually makes getting more contributions and donations harder if people cannot see that it was spent on what it was supposed to in a timely manner. I mean, we've talked a lot about those dormant funds or whatever that start to collect. But that has to be part of whatever we decide, if we had to augment any policy or anything.
Agree.
Anything else on this? We have our chief.
Yes, I think we're ready for our chief's part.
Okay.
I'll let her go for the next couple slides. I mean, you did the research.
Oh, gosh, no, too much credit. So in partnership with our general counsel's office, treasurer's office, and myself, we took this opportunity to further delineate between funds that are raised, because I think it's common for us to kind of lump them all together. But in fact, due to board policy and Ohio Revised Code, they are different based on the form and fashion in which they are collected. So to begin, you'll see on the slide here, the Ohio Revised Code breaks out clearly student activity funds, which are those that are raised by students, our staff, school resources go into raising them, and those are in fact public dollars. The alternative, though, is our NSOs, our non-school organizations, and those are independent and from the district separate entities. So we actually have 2 board policies. We'll cover one in just a few slides, but it is 9212, which is over NSOs, and then a board policy over student activity funds, which is 6610, which we've linked in this fact sheet that you have in your folders as well as on board docs. So moving on, I think these tables do a better job summarizing than I could even do verbally. And again, they are available in your folders, as I acknowledge the small size of the text there. So essentially, it really asks us, in what situation are funds, student activity funds, and therefore CPS public dollars, and in what situations are those funds external independent funds that then would enter the district perhaps as a donation via the process that Treasurer Gustin just covered. So I think the biggest differentiator is, like I mentioned, if you're using students or staff, those are student activity funds. The gray area, as I was thinking through this, is when can staff take the form of an NSO? When are they no longer serving as a CPS representative? And so that really seemed, from my research, to be a very small window of an employee acting as a member of the public, as a general citizen. But I did some examples on the next page, and I think one that highlights that. So the very bottom, you can glance through all these scenarios, happy to answer any questions. But this one here is a football coach holds a fundraising event to benefit a team after
Always
school
the football
hours.
guy.
Yeah.
36 years in Wyoming, I know, it's always the football guys.
Yes, and so in my mind, initially, I'm thinking if it's after school hours, are they just acting as an individual citizen? And quite frankly, they're not. They are serving in their capacity, representing their team and their school. So those would be student activity funds that must be deposited with Cincinnati Public Schools. So again, these are not, the origin of this requirement is not a CPS decision. It's Ohio Revised Code and then fully adopted via board policy. But I think as we think through future partnerships with our NSOs, helping draw this line as to where the funds should live and be deposited will be helpful in creating clear guidance. So more than happy to dive into any of these scenarios or to talk through in greater detail, but I think this can be a tool that we can share with other folks. And I'm looking over to our Assistant General Counsel too, if she has anything she would like to add.
Thank you. I was just going to add, I think this chart really does do a very good job of, mapping out different scenarios. But also a good distinction that staff and the public should keep in mind is also how students participate in these activities, because students are prohibited from raising funds for things that are outside of a school purpose. And so again, that's a good way for people to kind of make that delineation, especially if they're integrating students into the fundraising. It should be something that's done within the school walls and for the school purpose. So I know sometimes that can be great, but that really is the delineation when it comes to students participating.
Mr. Craig?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's really helpful to see the scenarios, because I think sometimes we look at a policy and then we try to figure out what that policy means, because the policy is written in language that's not meant to tell you what it means. It's
Who writes that policy? Oh, yeah, is that general counsel?
wonderful. Look, I do this at UC all the time. I will say, I think one of the things that might be helpful as we go forward with this, though, too, because explaining some of those uniqueness moments to some of these scenarios, like, the football coach who says, we have a student who needs X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do some private fundraising to make sure this student gets the football cleats they need this year. Not thinking about it as an activity that would fall within anything that the school would be responsible for, right? And I know we have folks who do that from the genuineness of their hearts. I've been at buildings where they've been talking about, I was at a building one day where they were trying to do funds to raise to support a family where the child had passed away, and these type of things. And it's almost better to tell them to let someone else do it that's not CPS, so that it does not become an issue, right? So if someone outside says, I want to raise dollars to buy a kid cleats, that's them, right? Like some parent sits down and says, 2 or 3 parents get together and say, I want to raise funds to buy kids cleats, then they donate the cleats and it's fine. But if a coach does the exact same thing, it's a different process. And so I think that's almost the other thing, is sometimes getting us out of, and I think that was one of the things we talked about even with crowdsourcing, is the GoFundMe's get us in trouble. But if a family has a GoFundMe for something that they need, and we say, hey, if you all happen to want to, this is a family put this out there, you're welcome to take a look at it, yada, yada, yada. It's a very different thing. And I think that's helpful for some of these scenarios, because it really does put it back into the picture of, it's not always what you're doing, but it's how it's done.
If I may, I think it's a great time to bring full circle to the crowdfunding policy. And now that CPS is fully endorsed, Donors Choose, that is a phenomenal route for our coaches, our teachers, our staff to follow that process and to get the materials, the supplies, the assets they need. And that really does allow us to accept those as a district, and it kind of helps with all of the consolidation of all of those various places those were taking place previously. So I think I'm very pleased to see how all of these pieces really are coming together very nicely.
Okay. Any other comments? I have a question. How does now the arrival of a foundation impact on all of the policies that we've just discussed? Because I know there's been money certainly raised that has done because the superintendent's been involved with other organizations. How do we have to adjust what we're doing? How are we able to delineate, or does this take care of that? And my other question, there was recently on Facebook, this is about 4 weeks ago, one of our teachers was raising money in a kind of a GoFund, and people were a little bit alarmed with the use of Facebook, particularly to do it, but I understand why they would do it. And then it was actual money, and this is where you can send the money. And it appeared to be kind of alarming to, rightfully so, some of the folks on Facebook. So those are my 2 things about foundation, and also How did we ask on that GoFundMe?
So I think, you know, part of the thing of the foundation is, and definitely, you know, sharing this discussion with them. And I started that. I gave them a heads up. We're going to be talking about this, but we'll share with them. I mean, you know, our policy is based pretty much directly on Ohio Revised Code. And so we just have to make sure, you know, we're all kind of cognizant of that. I think some of their marketing materials, we might want them to change a couple words. Like one of their pillars they talk about is student activity funds, which I think I think that's a good description of it, but it's also a technical term that someone from an audit perspective would look at and say, oh, that's clearly not something, it's clearly not in their bailiwick, where there is an outside organization getting outside donations. We just need to maybe check the kind of the terminology they're using so that we're clear on these things. For your second question, so we're finally I'm happy to announce, we're finally at the point to start really implementing the crowdfunding policy that was passed. So you'll see, we're going to ramping that up. It's last slide 59, Rob. We are aligned with Donors Choose as our official platform. And thank you, Superintendent Murphy, for filling out the forms and getting that aligned. It makes our tracking really easy. You said what, Lauren? How much do we get? About $2 million so far in stuff and
To
items?
date, in all the years of support that we've had through Donors Choose, kind of informally, we have $2.2 million. And the other wonderful aspect from a control and an auditor perspective is that all of those funds that folks donate actually come to us in the form of items, goods. So that is a very controlled way for donors to know that what they intend to be purchased is in fact purchased and delivered to our schools. So it's in my opinion, as an auditor, a pretty secure and controlled method as well.
Yes, and they send us monthly reports. So we will be kind of moving everyone to Donors Choose as our platform. We kind of have an approval form set up for teachers who want to use it. You know, make sure that the principal's aware, make sure other people in the district are awareness. I know, I think technology and facilities have some, you know, just kind of want to know what's being requested to make sure, you know, that we're not requesting things that won't work at CPS, and we can kind of better guide that. So that's rolling out between now and December.
Yeah, I remember when they came to present, it was maybe, was it 3 years or so ago? The donors, I can't remember, they actually came, and it was a way to actually do what we were saying, which is really great. And that should almost be, do that or don't do anything.
Yeah, they're the only
Sanction.
preferred vendor at this time. Now, that might change, you know, these things change all the time.
Sure.
And so there might be a new group that comes out, but at current time, they are the only preferred platform for us. And so we'll be trying to get everyone onto that. And the nice thing is there's a CPS landing page. So if you're interested in a specific school, you can search by school, but if you're just interested in what the district has out there, you can also search by CPS and see all of the campaigns across our district, which is kind of nice.
Sure.
To Vice President Bolton's first question, so would Kid Future, trying to remember new title here, that would be considered an NSO, right? Like as their fundings come in. And I think that's one of the things also, I think this is going to be a little bit of the interesting balance and challenge with how we manage that relationship, because there is the potential for them to be at events or at activities in which folks could then be able to donate that I guess we want to make sure there's a separation in a lot of ways to ensure that folks are not thinking they're donating to CPS at a CPS event when in fact it may be going to Kid Future. And I think, or being very clear about those separate lines, right? Because I think you can still use still use our facilities as an NSO, right? It's just that we have to make sure that what is being communicated to folks outside of the district, or folks who are working with the district, this is a separate entity who's collecting X, Y, and Z. Is that like a fair
Yeah.
assessment?
Yes, I mean, I think the branding and the New Kid Future name helps that to some extent. Because it's clear, you can make it very, you can make it easier to make it clear it's a different entity.
And then I guess to that point, like maybe a second question on that is that we have some, especially at our sporting events and other activities where we have groups who will come in to volunteer or to serve in certain capacities to provide stuff to the district, right? Like whether it's providing food vendors or these type of things that, you know, a portion of it may go to us or maybe use space and allow us to collect a certain portion for different things. And so I guess the other thing is how will that be communicated clearly to delineate between things that are a student activity funds type activity or versus a NSO?
I will say in practice, and like just thinking about going to football games, not just at CPS, but across many places, you know, usually the boosters run the concession stand and usually the boosters of the band does a split the pot. Now, do they all, you know, it's kind of just a known thing. And I think we could talk about, you know, better identifying those things, but you know, it's kind of the way the world works. Wouldn't you agree, Superintendent?
I was only going to add to that. This question pretty much came up during your board retreat, and that whole delineation, I do think, needs to be mapped out. I've seen alumni groups, I'll say unofficial alumni groups, have fundraisers. Who knows where those dollars go? So having this foundation just kind of heightens the need to have that conversation.
And I just want to add to my question. I think part of my thought around this also is that we have so many of these activities where, like, if you're at, you know, you're at the Taft football game, you're at the Withrow football game, you may not know who those groups are because that's what you're thinking about, right? Like you're thinking, I'm at this game, and just making sure that they're very clear about where those funds go and who those groups are participating, as you do everywhere, right? Like any group will do that, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it. But I think adding in Kid Future and adding some of the other things we're doing, just making sure that all of those folks are very clear. This is the Kid Future is hosting the blah 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 blah, as opposed to like this is the CPS split the pot.
And money is donated specifically or given, if you will. It's not donated, but given or shared or whatever with CPS for a specific CPS purpose. That's not necessarily been
Yeah.
raised by the foundation or anything. That's so, do we keep those separate or do they, I mean, obviously we're gonna, I don't know how, you all have to worry about that. But
I mean, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
the chief has something to
I was just
add.
gonna add one additional thing. So as I look through Kid Future's service offerings, where they had that table where they are a vendor and then these student activity services and then their primary focus on the pillars of Kid Future. As I kind of pieced apart, so to speak, the student activity services, I think the area where they can provide a lot of benefit and support to our community are offering those account management services for our PTOs, for our boosters, for things like that, for other NSOs. I think there's a lot of value to that. However, unfortunately, due to the law, they're not able to so kindly provide those to us because those funds must be, student activity funds must be deposited with the district. So I think in our partnership with them, we can kind of hopefully direct them to where they can legally and so kindly provide those services to help in our donations, but also respecting the restrictions that unfortunately we kind of have to deliver.
And that is critical, because that has been the continuing problem, besides who's a vendor and who's a funder. And okay, you had a comment, Mike, did I
I
step
did.
on your line?
I did. I forgot. It must not have been that important.
There you go, well, or the chief said it.
Or the chief covered it perfectly. How about that?
That's exactly right, that's the way, yes, please.
I was just going to add one more comment too, in talking about, you know, making those clear delineations. It's also, the onus is also on those organizations as well to also effectively communicate. So if they're raising funds on behalf of a specific CPS purpose, it should be clearly, you know, it should be clearly communicated to the potential donor. And I'm assuming if they're also coming into our buildings and our events, that's something that they would still need to get permission from either the district through the principal or depending on, what type of event it is. So again, it's like everybody should be aware this entity is going to be here for this purpose and it should be clear on the onset. And if we haven't been doing a good job of that, I guess maybe doing a better job, but.
And sometimes that has been very loosey-goosey to use our facilities and then raise something. But I know there's a very strong policy about using our logo or using anything that is sanctioned as ours. But I don't know if we're strict about some of the other things that we probably need to be more strict about, especially with the arrival now of the foundation. Any last thoughts? Yes, Chief?
Just one final point with our building and facilities usage with the more robust rental process that Mr. Burkhardt has overseen with our facilities team. I think this further strengthens the fact that when NSOs want to use our buildings, they won't be up and running unless they've completed a form and they have all of that pre-work. So I think it gives us this environment with all of these improvements a lot more structure. So I just think all of these pieces really are coming together nicely.
I would agree. Any comment about that? All right. I do remember that our schools are the center of the community and we wanted a lot of forms to be filled out, but we also want it to be possible for the community to use our schools.
Yes.
Especially as we approach some other requests that we're about to make, I'm sure, along the way. Is there any policy change, any guideline change? Is there any purpose or reason for any additional postings of any of this that we've discussed, or professional development? Moving forward, what would be the next steps? Is there any reason for clarification or sharing of information, Superintendent?
General Counsel has shared this during the most recent principal meeting,
Okay.
but because it's new, ongoing reminders or clarification will be important, and follow-up from this meeting will continue with the principals and our ADs as well.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? And frankly, all the extracurricular people. Okay, next,
Yeah, I think for the sake of our large group here,
yes.
we should go to KPI updates, and I will turn it
1B or
over to
what is
Mr.
it?
Cody, if
Oh, okay, good.
that's acceptable to the chair.
Yes,
Good morning. Thank you once again for being here. My name is Cody Hutchins. I'm the contract analyst here at the district. Rob, if you would like to go to slide 33, please. So while he's doing that, today we're starting the first of a few rounds of reviewing our KPI measures for our over $200,000 contracts. I am joined today by a few special guests that we're wonderfully happy to be here and work very collaboratively
It is
to
the place
join.
to be.
This is the hopping place to be today.
increasingly so.
Yes, ma'am. That's good news, though, right? Getting good.
Always.
Pool into finance. So next slide, Mr. Rob. Just a quick review of the purpose of why we're doing this. We really just want to make sure that we're measuring these outcomes so that the outcomes that our students and our staff are getting are the best possible. We also want to make sure that we're cultivating and adopting that culture of performance accountability, not just by us, but also by our vendors. And then really, you want to make sure that everything we do already aligns with district goals. We want to make sure that the vendors are performing the same rules and regulations that we are. And then at the end of the year, we use a lot of these decisions with KPIs and continuing contracts and a lot of the information discussed today for making data-driven decisions. And then finally, I know our chief audit would love this comment, but mitigation of risk associated with servicing out services. We know if we do it in-house, we kind of have a very close eye on everything going on, but just this is another level to making sure that we're mitigating the risk of servicing out. Next slide, please. So our first guest today, Rob, if you want to click on that link there, would be Mr. Gollihue with ITM, and I will pass it on to him.
Well, I guess I won the carnival plushie for the morning. Get to go first. Get the big money out the way.
There you go.
I think might even just be a surplus of having the most contracts at a single thing.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
for that, I did try to get us a little bit more direction. I put at your seats this morning a supplemental sheet that says ITM and assessment contract review. I apologize that wasn't available in advance, but frankly, it came from, I was making my notes this morning. And I was like, it might just be easier to give them this as a reference. So
Great.
it makes it a little bit easier for us to talk through. Because while we have 25 contracts on the list, they really break down into 4 categories. Because a lot of them come into one combination to make a service. It's all the pieces and parts that build that up. Also, for us, you won't see, not in every case is a KPI and a service level agreement necessarily the same thing. But for most of our contracts, especially the ones we're looking at today, they really are kind of synonymous. You're not going to see a lot of academic KPIs where, frankly, we know that giving a third grader a computer, just putting it in their hands, doesn't increase the number of third graders who pass the third grade reading guarantee. That's the platform by which we provide access to the tools for intervention, differentiation, engagement at the direction of a teacher that then enables them to build that scaffolding to help a student get a better outcome. So it's like the foundational layer. So it's a little different. So most of ours do come in the form of those SLAs. And most of those are going to be in one of 2 ways. Either it's a binary. So for most equipment, if we buy 30 display boards, did you give us 30 display boards? Yes, great. We've met the SLA. Or it's going to come in terms of service levels that are baked into the contract. So when we submit a ticket, did you respond within 4 hours? Did you resolve it within 48 hours? Did you do whatever we are setting as a criteria? And most every one of these services has portals or monitoring that we manage that's built in so we can see. So for uptime, right? The network has to be up 99% of the time. When any part of it goes down, we're alerted. We track that to the second and the minute so that we can add that up over the course of the year, and we reconcile it each month to say, we have a 99% uptime expectation. This is how many minutes we were available. This is how many we weren't. Does it hit it or not? And if not, all of our contracts that we're looking at today, minus maybe one, has remuneration built into it. So if we don't hit those service level agreements, then we get money back. So the first category is what I would call the foundational. These are the network, the wireless access points and system, our phones, the desk phones, the voice system, copy print, and our cybersecurity. So those really kind of come together to form our network layer. There are 5 of the contracts in total there for $6.6 million. All of those are cases where the SLA is baked in for uptime. That's the 99% that we're looking for. One thing I would note about that one is the voice services for our phone is actually being replaced this year. So we went through the bidding process over the summer. We ended it in September. So we will be having a new phone provider. It is still sort of through similar partners, but in a different platform. So we'll be,
How the superintendent feels about that.
yeah. So this will be
That was from her phone.
This will be a massive change for the district this school year that we are looking to complete by June 30th. You'll see a lot more information coming over the next couple months as we've been working with the people we awarded the bid to in terms of what the kickoff implementation and process will look like and scheduling. But our intent is to make this as seamless and minimal impact to our customers as possible. On the back end, it's a big change. On the front end, you'll look down one day, you have a phone. The next day you look down and it looks like it's a different phone, but basically your functionality should stay the same. That's really our goal of the transition.
Mr. Crossett?
Just curious on this voice system, new system coming in, were you able to assess the utilization of the system versus how many folks are using their cell phones?
We did. In fact, the different license model that we're moving towards is moving away from an on-premise system, which is what we have today, where we have everything basically in-house, in the building, in our networks, that we manage the number of licenses, the number of phones, the number of DIDs or phone numbers we have, and we pay for all of that. We're moving towards basically a phone as a service model with a cloud-based provider, so that we just issue a license for a specific person who needs it to use, and it doesn't matter whether you're using the phone on the desk, or if you're using a soft phone on your laptop, or if you're using it through a third-party service on your cell phone, that could be personal or district. It's always going to only use that one license that's dedicated to you. So we can actually base it and manage it on individual level and not just on the device level that we have today.
Great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The second bucket are our device fleet. So this would be inclusive of not just our laptops and computers, but also our AV, the display boards, the sound systems, the classroom technology that's in our buildings, as well as our CPS staff cell phones. The contracts kind of go across a variety of different layers for that, including the procurement and lease payments of the devices, the warehousing, transportation, setup and configuration, delivery and deployment, break fix, and user support. So all of that bundles up into our device fleet. That's how we manage all the devices we have across the district. That's 14 total contracts with a $8.8 million total cost. I do want to point out just one kind of caveat, that is much lower this year than you would have seen in the past or you'll see going in the future. As a reminder, during the budgeting cycle for this last year, we deferred a number of lease payments to get us where we needed to be. So that number typically that you would see would be closer to around 16 million, not the 8.8 that we have here today. And again, the SLAs for that are kind of mixed. It's partially binary as did we get the equipment we paid for, yes or no? And then it's based on the SLAs that when we have a service that we issue a ticket for, are they responsive in the timelines that we've set for them to be able to respond and resolve issues. The third category are the core applications. These are the things that are fundamental to CPS, like our SIS, our student data system, which is now Focus that we moved to, our LMS, our learning management system, which is Canvas, the Gaggle, which does our student monitoring for basically online interactions through Google to alert us of any threats of self-harm, harm to others, or behavioral issues, as well as our database management. We have a number of databases that have to back in all the systems. That provides the monitoring, alerting, and management of some resources basically to monitor and manage those databases that we have to have everything else work. Those are 4 contracts at 1.2 million, all of which have the SLA baked into the contract. When we do, again, have the remunerations if there's any kind of failure to meet those SLAs. The last category, and is just one contract, is the benchmark assessment. That's iReady. So the way that we do the contract for it's a little different. A portion of that is for the testing platform. That's the part that manages out of the testing department and assessment. But instead of having to have 9 different contracts, we include some of the curricular tools in that contract. We don't manage those. We don't evaluate those within the department. We are only looking at the assessment, but this amount represents the entire contract, if that makes sense. So again, SLA is baked in. A lot of that is also what we manage is if we're paying for 13,000 students to be able to test, we go in and assign the students to be able to do it, and suddenly it says, you can only test 10,000. We would obviously have a problem with it. So as long as we have the license we're entitled to, we're in pretty good shape for meeting what they're required. Then the last one is one extra contract that's 1.2 million. It's actually a duplicate PO. And where that came from was when we were doing the voice bids to switch over the systems. I said that didn't happen until September, didn't get finished. So we initially had to enter the PO for the current services that we have, but we've since renegotiated with them that we're only going to be paying and using it for 6 months for the implementation, and then going to a month-by-month invoicing and billing against that service while we're making the transition. So that way we have a lot more flexibility as to when we finish the project. And then the remainder of those funds are rededicated to the new system. So we're still at the 1.2 million in total for the year is what we'll have, but it's no longer going to be just to the current system. It's going to be split between the current and the new in parallel. So then we ended up having to cancel that PO and issue the separate POs, which are included in the 14 above. So that 1.2 there is actually a duplicate amount.
Question?
So kind of 2 questions, and I'll try to be quick with both of these. But the first is really around, I think with KPIs for specifically your area, where most of them will not be attached to like a specific grade result or specific academic results. Are we using the KPIs and doing assessments when the contracts come back up for either renewal or rebid or that type of deal? And then I think the second question is really around kind of how are we, particularly both the KPI, but then also maybe the usage of certain technology, maybe the other aspect of how do we track that not necessarily connected to the contract, but tells us whether or not the contract is necessary going forward. So
We do actually do both of those. So for the most part, in our case, and when I say that we can have remunerations if they fail to meet our SLAs, I will tell you that happens very, very rarely. Because ultimately, when we're looking at a contract year over year, if they were to fail to meet those SLAs, then they're not going to be the provider going forward. I mean, it's very rare that you would get more than once on those that we're going to then continue to use your service without some serious discussion or changes. Most of these contracts are all going to be, for lack of a better term, indefinitely repeating. But the vendor and the amounts will change based on basically a year by year evaluation of, did the service meet the requirements that we have? Is it what we need? And it's based on, for especially the leasing, the number of devices each year that we need to roll over in our 5-year life cycle. So if we're doing 6,000 this year, then that line goes up a little bit for the various services. If we're only doing 3,000, it'll be a smaller amount. But there always will be those services needed as long as we have those fleet of devices. And then in terms of usage, we do monitor virtually everything for usage. In fact, we were just looking yesterday, and probably a little too much information. We were just looking at our take-home usage across high schools in the last couple of days to see, based on after-school usage of the devices. And I challenged the team to come back and look and get some reporting on what are they actually doing so that we can have some of that as we go forward into our next budget conversations.
And I think that's important also because, there's the aspect of, to your point, we're going to still use technology in certain ways. I think it's also helpful for us to know whether or not those things are being used in the way that they were intended to be used. And if they're not, either is that a directive that we give out to whether it's staff, students, parents, whatever may have you, or is that a decision as to say, maybe this just isn't the thing that we need to utilize to get the benefit we were looking for? So I appreciate you guys tracking that information.
Okay.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Yep.
All right, so the next section we're going to switch over to is facility. So I have my friend here, Mr. Tyrone Walton, and Mr. Chris Burkhart here to back up and support him. But I'll hand it over to Mr. Tyrone here.
Yes, so we're starting out with our supply vendor, Valley Janitorial. First of all, I want to say that we entered into a 3-year contract with Valley with 2 1-year renewals. And that renewal, this is the last year of the renewal. And what we've done, just to kind of give you guys a little backdrop, in working with Mr. Burkhart, is that we decided that we wanted to streamline our vendors in terms of what they are providing in terms of green products. So what we did was we sat down with the vendors to talk about how can we get one product, green product dispensing line for all of our schools. So when you look at this spreadsheet here, it has Valley and Sunset, and then we also have All Pro. What we did is we negotiated where they could provide one brand of products for all of our schools. At the time in 2021, I think the concerns was just that we didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket because we didn't, at the time, they didn't feel comfortable having one vendor service all the schools. But at least now moving forward, we can provide a RFP with one brand of green cleaning products. That was our goal. So I will say that was a goal that we wanted to do, is just to get all the schools streamlined with one product of green products. As far as the KPIs is concerned, we definitely are hitting our marks with the KPIs. We typically look at on-time delivery. We look at the service quality of the product and things of that nature. If you look at the evidence of that, we've processed 88 invoices with our first vendor and 265 invoices with our second vendor. And I think we're just at a point now where moving forward, when we put it out for bid this spring, we'll be able to hopefully get better pricing because we streamlined our products. You want to add anything to that, Mr. Burkhart?
Thank you. Multiple years ago, we every segment of school was using a different product, and as custodians and building engineers went from one school to the next, they had to learn a whole new system of cleaning products, how to use them, what the dilution rates were, and so this streamlines the entire district. So as folks move from school to school, it's much more clear that how we use the products, when we use the products, and what products we use for what specific level of cleaning. Also, Mr. Tyrone said we are looking at green products, and as those counterparts become available and are at the same cost, we are moving to those green products. So We're not doing it just because we want them to be green. They have to work. Obviously, when you have 67 buildings that we're operating out of, making sure that those products work just as good as their counterparts. And so there's a lot of areas of being green and sustainability that I don't think technology is here yet. As we look at, for example, our vehicles and having trucks that are electric and having those meet the same standards as our regular combustion engines. We're not there yet, but in relation to chemicals, yes, we are there. The technology is there, and we found counterparts that meet those needs.
And we also measure
Hold on
those.
just a second, sir.
Oh, go ahead.
You good?
No, I just want to just want to reiterate that we do measure our contractors, our vendors, when it comes to their service quality levels by using a scorecard. And we make sure we track that. So when we do put it out for bid, we have something to reference the next time it goes out for RFP.
Good point.
I,
Craig?
just the two thoughts. One is, I know we did this last year. Part of the thought process at that point also was capacity, because there was a question mark of whether or not the vendors themselves could provide enough of the supplies to, and that was a thing we were tracking. So it sounds like
Yeah,
they have the ability to provide the capacity, and we're feeling good about that.
absolutely.
I think this is also something, as we talk about things that the district does, and something we can highlight in some ways. So maybe that's something that we might task marketing and communication around, is just that idea of the ways that we are green, the ways that we have sustainability built into how we operate as a district, is a very positive thing that we can talk to folks about, to highlight, especially as we look at future things to build investment in, is that we are doing things in that next century version of what a school district should do. And so being sustainable and using cleaner products that make the building safer for kids is a great way to do that.
I would follow up with that, just that the whole green piece is very important for that narrative for the next century. And that we do have a long history, whether it's the facilities master plan or whether it's this incredible network that we have with the green folks that are so important to us, even in our career tech and what have you. But I do think that's the narrative that should be presented too, this, almost the thing that you presented to the Green Umbrella Network folks about the district continuing its history of being green and what that all entails. Because I think the board would like to hear that report. Mr. Crossett?
I think it's your strategic plan that you talked about developing, yeah.
I think that'd be very much, and then that will be part of the larger strategic plan. And even something I can remember, Member Morosky being very, very determined, not about the green thing as much as about the food that we were serving our kids. It was at a much greater cost, but it was much more locally driven. It was much healthier food. It was more the farm to the table when we were doing that with his leadership 4 years ago, before it became quite so prevalent. We lead, we don't follow. So go ahead.
Oh, and then the other one on here, outside the supplies that we get through our vendors, is our PNC vendor that we use, which is a pass-through, district pass-through cost. I just want to make sure I mention that since it's on the list. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Other than that, that concludes my presentation.
Your fleet, yeah.
Exactly.
Still basking in the glow of the dedication of the Darlene K. Mine Wellness Center, as I recall.
Yes.
Still basking in that.
Yes.
As a matter of fact,
Yes,
came
we
up
needed
twice
that.
in two different
needed that,
community
yeah.
council meetings I went to.
Did it?
So,
Oh,
yeah,
congratulations.
it was great. Sir?
Yeah, so I'm a member of Cody's small but mighty team in relation to KPIs. We are a small but mighty group, and we've really looked at making sure that some of those either pass-through services or some of those utility type items that do have a large cost, that yes, we want to make sure we're holding those accountable, but there's only one Cincinnati Waterworks. There's only one Duke Energy.
And don't say a word against it.
They got us.
My father was
got us.
superintendent of Waterworks, when it was number one in the world.
They got us.
And we appreciate them. But we've specifically removed a lot of
you're
those
right.
from the KPIs that you might have seen previously. So the report is significantly smaller because we've removed those. I just wanted to call that out.
Mr. Craig?
I just, one other thing that came to mind, and I know, I had discussions, I think, with Mr. Burkhardt about this before, but like ways that we can also incorporate our students into learning about and understanding how to use green products, how to do some of these things, because I think that's another way potentially we could, again, not a KPI for the contract, but it is a benefit to the services, because I think we've done that a little bit with culinary, of how teaching kids how to pick food and think about food in a different way. But again, I think this is another area where a skill set build might teach a kid something they can take home with them and use in their own lives in a way to be like healthier in their own space and cleaner in their own space. That also could be something that, again, our community learning center model opens up opportunities for us to share that stuff with parents as well. And so like that's another area where I distinctly remember at some point, like P&G used to do something similar with some of their products where they would provide those products to the parents and you could learn how to like, how you're supposed to use the Tide stick, right? Like how you're supposed to use some of their products correctly. And then test it out to see how that works and that benefits and that kind of deal. And so I think that's something our students might enjoy as well.
And certainly monitoring energy use is always something that can be done, and that's an important career path for kids. And an interest besides not just the no waste down the road, so to speak, but also actually being able to monitor energy use. I know they do that in a number of the northern Kentucky schools, and it literally, literally is a career path, and you get the points that you need to advance on some of that, so that, and we have the technology to do it.
Oh, we
And
do,
that-
we do.
I think we do need to save on energy from that standpoint. Other, go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Walton. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Burkhart. So our next section, we're going to move on to transportation. Our wonderful Miss Pam Williams that's coming here to join us. And so we'll welcome her.
Big T,
Yep,
transportation.
the big one. So also Mr. Burkhart again here to support her. So
Good
pass the
morning,
torch to you.
everyone. I'm Pam Williams, the Director of Transportation.
We welcome you. Mr. Craig is,
Thank you.
reference, so this is, very important.
Absolutely. We're so proud of Pam.
Thank you, thank you. So, want to discuss our KPIs in transportation. And we focus on our yellow bus, Metro, our multi-vendor, and our fuel vendors. And one of our important measurements for our yellow bus is the number of vehicles, the miles that is traveled, the students we transport, and the safety and our on-time performance. And as of today, with our on-time performance, we're at 92.8% with our school start on time. And then we're at 98.9% with reporting GPS on all our yellow bus vehicles. And our next KPI with Metro, we basically, our KPIs is focused on the number of Metro cards that are issued out to the population that is eligible for that service. And with our multi-vendor, this is where we call them the white fleet vendor, and this is where they are transporting our Project Connect, our KISSER students, and our ESSA students. And they are the more transient students that can come from other districts that we are required to provide that service. And so we look at that vendor is the ability to transport those students. Are they able to meet those criteria that the district required us to provide for those students? And with our fuel, our KPIs is based on the delivery costs, the market weights, and our fuel types. So that is based on our yellow bus vendors that based on the vehicles they're using. It could be diesel, regular gas. We are about to explore with the electric bus here in a minute. So that's another different avenue that we'll be venturing into.
Well, this can't get much better than 99 something or other.
Right.
After what we've all lived through. Sir, go ahead.
Yes, if I could, and I think Ms. Williams has done a great job, but she's buried the lead on this. Back in 2022, in August of '22, our on-time rate was 34.6%.
Yep.
So we've gone from 34.6% to 92.8. Now, we're not going to rest on our laurels at 92.8 because that still means 7% on any given day of students are not getting to school on time. But we've made great strides, and the transportation team has made great strides working with our event. Exactly, we should celebrate it. Our yellow bus vendors at times get a little annoyed by as many times as we call them and hold meetings, but it goes to show that, if you're diligent and you're pressing vendors to be partners and to be successful, this can happen.
Sir?
Real quick, I just wanted, if Pam could, talk a little bit about the systems you guys use to track everything, because I think it's pretty cool. There's are there some pictures all the way to the right there, Rob? It just kind of shows the evidence of how much work is being put in to track these KPIs, to take this stuff seriously. And just kudos to our transportation team by all that evidence that they're able to provide. And Pam's team's great to work with. So just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So one of the reports that we use is a Cognos daily arrival AM and PM report, and we get that daily to show us how the vendors are meeting our expectations. And it provides us the percentage of those two categories I stated, the school on-time performance and our GPS arrival time. So the GPS arrival time is very important because we use our on-screen system to be able to track buses where, if we get a call from a principal, they're looking for a bus, we're able to get that live information to that principal immediately. So those things are very important. Also, we utilize our, I can't even, look, I can try to see it. But the other systems that we use is our Versatrans system, is our routing and software system that we utilize. We pull a lot of that information as well, like the mileage piece. We utilize that system for the mileage. So those are our main systems we're using to track how our vendors are doing.
Mr. Crossett?
Yeah, this is mostly focused on yellow bus and not Metro.
Yes, Metro provides their own on-time performance to us.
While we don't have specific KPIs for Metro, anecdotally, whenever we get any complaints with Metro, we're actually on the phone with Metro at least once or twice a week. And that goes to both load capacity and how many students are on the buses and if they're too crowded, as well as frequency of buses. So as we bring those to Metro's attention, they've been wonderful partners in helping us alleviate some of those stressors, and where they need to, they've added, a frequency, or we've talked about other routes that students can take to get to school on buses that maybe aren't as crowded, but still end up in the same location.
Superintendent?
Thank you. May I ask Ms. Williams to talk just briefly about the process for young people securing their bus passes? That seems to be a topic of concern. And the from start to finish, and then the timeline.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So if a student did not, I'm going to use this year, for example, Metro runs a report, a pass report where they are pulling information from their fare box. So if we have passes issued to students and they have no record of that student ever using that pass, then we mark that record in our system to say that that student never used that pass. So that following year, we do not create a pass because of the cost factor. So The other piece of it is we notify our athletics and schools, like here's your list of kids that previously never used a pass. So if the student is in need of a pass, then they will have to follow the process, which is filling out a transportation inquiry form to request that Metro Pass, so that we can then get that pass within 5 to 7 days and then have it delivered by our CPS carrier to that school. If a student is brand new, they are enrolled in a school, and I would say it's a 24-hour turnaround for that student to populate in our transportation system. And then we pull an export weekly, and it happens on Thursday. And that export is sent to Metro, and Metro then create those passes for those students, whether it's a black pass where it's a straight pass, a blue pass where it's a transfer, or the red is the extracurricular pass. So then those passes are created, delivered to us by the carrier, CPS carrier, and then we match up those passes based on that list that was exported to Metro. And we make sure that we received every pass, and then we send that list and keep a copy for ourselves, and then that list and passes goes to those schools.
Mr. Crossett?
Question, the number one item that comes up as a cause for chronic absenteeism is transportation. I think that comes from Ms. House Department. And also, the information I've gotten from the school social workers in charge of absenteeism. Is there any way you guys have a tremendous way of collecting data. Is there any way to correlate that with students that are in this chronic absenteeism, just to maybe see if there's any value in that, or maybe you're doing that already? I don't know.
So, excuse me, in so many cases, we don't have actual daily ridership for our yellow bus routes. We do have times where we will take attendance on bus routes, but it's not a daily occurrence where we do that. What we do track every day is each bus and whether it's on time or not on time. Actually, as we were talking earlier, the reports that Ms. Williams alluded to earlier popped up. They come in at 10:30 every morning. So at 10:30, everyone races their computer to see which buses or what our on-time percentage rate. Again, 92.8 again today. And then we look at those. We also get a separate report which tells you over the past weeks which buses have been habitually late. So we know when there's an accident on the roadway or the freeway that is kind of a one-off. But if we start to see a pattern, those are calls weekly that we have with the bus vendors, and we can look back to the minute and second what time those buses get to those campuses, because we have a geofence that the GPS pings off of within every stop, as well as when the bus leaves the lot in the morning, when it gets to the school, and when it returns in the either late morning or early evening.
Mr. Crossett?
Yeah, thank you. I was really thinking more about the high school students in Metro, where you can track the use of an individual card. And I believe those are the schools where we have the school social workers who focus on absenteeism. I thought that might be a place for data correlation. I don't know. Well, just a suggestion. You don't have to defend anything, just an idea.
Mr. Crossett, I wonder about Metro because they have a very regimented schedule with the city. I'm sure that they probably have a record of when their buses have mishaps and they would be running late. My thought and my wonder about high school is the kid may have to get on a little bit earlier of a bus if they're being late because of Metro. I just wonder.
But for Metro, we do have daily runs, or we know what students are on the bus because of the smart passes, or what do we know on at any given time about our Metro riders?
Yeah, we can get reporting on the number of students, for example, or how many times a student has used their card. We can get that tap. We don't get daily reporting that these students used this bus at this time. I don't know if their system is that sophisticated. We haven't asked for that data in the past. We've asked for data in relation to how many times has that student used that pass, because we look at those low levels. So if a student's only used their pass 5 times or 10 times over the course of the year, we're paying a lot of money for that pass. We want students to use it. So we really want to dig in. Why is that student only using it 5 days out of 170?
And we'd like them to use it to come and go to school.
Correct.
So that's why we're paying for it.
Right.
On that issue of the pass, the board actually said in one of the budget cuts along the way, we wanted you to, if we don't want to pay for passes that aren't being used. Well, we said that, so that was implemented. But on a daily basis, we do have ridership as to how many of our kids are riding Metro. It'd be interesting to know if there are reasons why some buses are delayed or late or something, some other reason. I think that would be helpful. I do want to say I was in 2 different community council meetings the last 2 weeks, and at both places, the same police officer reported that there's been no incidents to report necessarily at either the Oakley Transit Center or the Northside Transit Center. And she didn't know, the first time, she didn't know I was sitting there.
Don't talk about it. I'm kidding. I'm just joking.
I'm gonna talk
I'm
a
just
lot
kidding.
about it, but I understand. But I think that's important. I think there's been a huge improvement even in this year from last year. And that's partly some administration, certainly at Metro, as well as the work that you all are doing and the collaborative effort where this has been working through our kids' behaviors. Mr. Craig Jefferson?
Yeah, just 2 quick thoughts on that. I think one of the differences in some ways with Metro versus the yellow bus is that we have multiple routes at times, and so the understanding when students get there, to Superintendent's point, may also have a part on when they decided to catch the bus, either coming to school or leaving school. And so I do think maybe one of the things we can think about or look at is if there are patterns of when, especially after school more so than before school, of when students are using those passes. So like a time frame. I say that because I know a lot of folks, especially in some of our communities, have complained about, our students being present there, going later into the day. And students, when I met with a couple of students, they talked about when they could use their pass. And I think the motivating factor for us to make the time frame have a cutoff was to get them on a bus after school and traveling. And so for some of the students who were maybe going a little bit further in their travels, their concern was like, okay, if I get on the bus at 4 or 4:15 and my pass turns off at 5, am I able to get home, kind of deal. So I think that it would be helpful for us to see a little bit of just the times when in the afternoons, early evenings, when folks are moving on. It's just another one of those kind of things, not necessarily know exactly when students get on the bus, but maybe even just looking at either a time frame or a heat map of when students are more or less using the bus pass in the evenings. Then the other thought that I think is just really helpful in getting kind of again, I think about some of these KPIs are great for us to understand how beneficial it's been doing, but it's also helpful for us to think about how we're going to use it in the future. And I think it would be a really great example to look at the on-time percentage, and especially for our yellow buses. Are there certain parts of the routes or certain specific routes in certain areas of the city that are more on time than others, or that are struggling more than others? And that may also drive some of the decision-making we as a board would make as to, does this make sense to maybe rethink how we map school, map some of the opportunities to the students, or are we seeing a reason why, like for instance, you got a yellow bus is going a long distance on one particular route? Is that telling us that we need to kind of think about why that is, more so than think about what's the best way to quicken that route? Because I think the results might probably give us a different focal point, right? It's just another thing for us to think about in some ways, as we really think about how do we map students to the right schools, how do we give opportunities in those schools. If there's a particular route that's just taking a kid you know, a 45-minute yellow bus ride is a very different than a 45-minute Metro bus ride. And if that's the case, why is a student going 45 minutes on a yellow bus if they're passing other schools or other things like that might be worthwhile? So I think that to me, that second part is also using the KPIs to also then look at what are the opportunities for us as a district to ensure that our students and our parents, more so probably than the students, know the opportunities within their district or within their area, the things that might be closer to them, the resources that might be there to ensure that they're not picking a school because of what they heard 15 years ago about the school, as opposed to what's actually happening at the school building today.
The public issues are the delay of the Metro passes that I do hear. But again, it's anecdotal, so I don't know. The other piece is the end of the school day, getting the high school kids out of the business, the neighborhood business districts. This is very, very negative in Clifton. It's negative in Bond Hill. It's negative in a number of places. And I mean, that heat map might be interesting. We know who's not getting on the bus and going home right away instead of we know who's hanging around, and it's been very disruptive for sure. And I think everybody's got a full court press about the government square and all that kind of stuff. That's not my big concern. Mine is the neighborhood business districts and also the delay in the passes. But this is, my middle name was transportation for 10 years on this board. And I can't tell you how glad I am that T is now not part of my 3-letter initials. I appreciate it. Continuing.
Actually, that concludes the KPI review for this meeting. I want to thank all the volunteers that showed up today and their collaborative efforts. But I also want to thank their working teams, because many times I work with their working teams on getting a lot of this data, and I just want to say that all their teams do a wonderful job, and they are being led very well. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for coming, everybody. Good job.
Thank you.
And you do get to go if you want. You're
All right. It's our cue.
here another 6-7 hours.
That's our
We're
cue.
just getting started.
Yeah. Wait, is that still old business or what? We'll keep going. All right, what have we, are we ready to, is there anybody else pressed for time, Mike?
Not that I know of. I think the rest of us are here for the long haul.
Okay, Chairman, can you wait outside just for a second?
I would say Cody has one other thing he forgot to talk about.
Oh,
Code, what do we got, Code Man?
into that.
I mean, I think it's a quick discussion, but I think it's really neat if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. You just want to go to slide 38, Rob. And so while he's pulling that up, just to give a little basis of what we're getting ready to look at, I know in this finance committee, we talked for a numerous amount of times on looking at school budgets on a per pupil basis and looking at the actual school budget, all the things that go into it, all the funds and breaking things out. So what the process that I've started here is using our budget software and breaking out every school individually based on their budget unit first. And what that means is that is the money that the school technically owns at that time. It's not like a central office giving it to them or central office putting in a contract for them. That school is in charge of those funds and managing those funds. So that's what the budget unit is. That's the second column next to enrollment, or the third column next to enrollment, I'm sorry. After that, we then looked at the central office budget in schools. And what that means is if curriculum put in a couple instructional contracts for many schools to have supplies or things like that, things that are district-wide given out to the schools, but that are identified to that specific school. So then the third step, you're going to have all other district costs. So treasurer's office, a lot of ITM leases, just things like that, transportation costs. So the next step for that was to take all of those costs, and what I did was equally disperse them out. I took all of the enrollment, the total enrollment at the period of September, at the end of September. I believe that total number, if you wanted to click on that sheet, Rob, is like 34 and some change, but around 35,000, and divided all the other costs by that number, and then equitably placed it based on the number of enrollment at each school. So if transportation, or if all the other costs were 10 million, divided it out, then you multiply it by the enrollment at that school, and that is the technical portion that we're going to be breaking out. Oh, I did not make it public. Great. My apologies. I will make that public after this meeting. My apologies. But, so then the next step, what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is take those all other costs and meet with the individual departments, department heads, and break those costs out. So for example, transportation was a good example. Get with Mr. Burkhart and his team and see what those actual transportation costs that they have budgeted at transportation's budget unit for Aiken, for AMI, for AWL, and break that out and do that all over the board until that all other district cost column is eliminated and it's into categories. So then we can kind of see what the school budget is, what the central office budget is given to the schools, and then take a step further and see what transportation spending on Aiken, what facilities is spending on Aiken, things like that. So
I think really we're getting down to a true cost per school. You know, dividing, say, utilities equally among buildings isn't really a true cost.
Right.
It's not. We know some are more expensive than others. Same with transportation, same with, you know, devices, curriculum, those sort of things. So the goal of this exercise, and I think a lot of board members have asked for this over the course of time, is to develop a true per school cost that eliminates as many things as possible that we have to just allocate. Like treasurer's office, we probably just have to allocate us. Internal audit probably just has to be allocated, but a lot of the other things, we have better numbers. And so Cody's going to work on that, you know, every month to try to build out a true cost per school.
Craig?
Yeah, I think, I appreciate you doing the hard work on this, Cody. And I think one of the things for me with this is that I think we have a lot of things that we're not necessarily attributing or thinking about when we think about a school budget that is not necessarily under the control of the school. So I think in some ways maybe it's better to think of it as what are the dollars associated to a school versus necessarily the school's budget. Because the school only manages a certain portion of that. And then there are other dollars we're not actually giving to them to manage. We're just saying what we spend on the operation of or the facilitation of a school building. But I think the other thing that comes to mind in some ways is there are certain schools where we do things because of the need of the students at that particular school. And I'm also just wondering how much of, like, for instance, there are things that we attribute to central office budget that's really specifically because the students at that school need those particular services versus another school doesn't. And so how much of that we might see in some of the breakdown you do. So, I kind of wait to see what happens with that. But I think that might be the other thing we look at is we might have really high transportation costs for a particular school because we have a lot of students who have disabilities or special needs, or we have a large percentage of the school students who are Project Connect students who are going to a particular school versus another school that doesn't have those same things. Those costs aren't something we would be like, hey, but it'd be something we could see and be able to explain away.
absolutely.
Mr. Crossett?
Yeah, I was just curious, are you setting this up in the, I guess, the general ledger and the ledger so that going forward it's fairly automatic to collect this information going in the future in terms of maybe account classifications or allocation methods that could be automated? I was just curious, if, as you're building this, can it be fairly easy to create it on a monthly basis?
That's a tough question to answer. Some of it can be pretty quick and easy.
Finally, I asked a tough question.
You saw my eyes spinning, right? I was like, how do I answer that? There are processes that can be done. Really, I don't think it can be automated. I'm just going to be honest. Based on the amount of data and information that goes into it, I don't know that it can be automated. The initial budget piece can be, in my opinion. You can pull that out based on function, pull that out based on budget unit. Those kind of things can be pretty quick and automated. Going further, as I work with each individual department, what we can look into is see if there are things that we can automate together that we can implement at the beginning of the budget session or seasons. And say, hey, here's how we're going to start looking at the true cost of schools going forward. When we do our budget and Allaview, is there a way we can identify this to say, hey, this is how much Aiken's getting, this is how much somebody's getting. Those are things we can look into. But transparently, on the top of my head, I don't know that it can be automated very quickly.
So you could, it sounds like you, from a process standpoint, it might be better to export data into a spreadsheet, and then you can add formulas and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I do like, and I'm sorry I had to step out, but I do like the idea of the per student, per school cost for transportation. That was my original Rosetta Stone of understanding. And it really impacts a lot of the decisions that we make, and I like it. You've got, and this goes back to 2023, the transportation cost per schools. And as well as, I know last year you all were able, or this past year, were able to produce the per school cost for energy. And I think all that is very, very important. And it might also help the back of the report card too, however they figure all that stuff out, because that's still on the financial page of our report card is not going to help us pass something next year. And that has to get improved with the budget and how we classify things when they compare us to the state. But yeah, it's important for us to know what the costs are. And to that question, 5 years ago, and I say this and I remember that this was true, but it's still unbelievable to me. But the transportation of our special needs kids and also of the other special requirements regarding transportation was costing as much as all of the yellow bus service was. And because of the nature of it, it's so expensive. And whether that's, and some of those kids needed more than we could even provide. But a lot of people might have been receiving services that probably weren't quite needed regarding some IEPs and whatever. We have to figure out ways to best serve as well as best save. So this is great. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Okay,
Shall we do financial reports?
oh Lord. I did that just for you, Kevin. Kevin and I walked in together and I almost teased him then, like, oh, I'm gonna have to listen to these reports. Yeah, yes. Star of the show right here, go for it.
One of these months I get to go first.
Forget it.
Then everybody has to sit through my thing, which they usually do, so.
That's, actually, that would be beneficial. We'll do that next month. Let everybody sit here through this and see what's going on month
No,
by
they
month.
usually do have to do that, so it's fine. It's all good. It's a Friday, so.
You're good,
The
Kev.
Bengals game kind of put
Did
me
that
in
take care of you?
Yeah, I'm a
You
little
and the
foggy this morning.
superintendent, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're lucky you're both here.
Yes, thank goodness. And we can
Well, yeah.
celebrate all weekend, because we don't have to play
And
again.
we'll have to. Go
All
for
right.
it.
So I'm going to skip back to slide number 4 and kind of talk about the overview things as we go through. So this is general ledger, all funds. The total at the end of the month was $212.3 million. You can see basically the orange is Star Ohio. The blue is all of our US Bank operating accounts. So about 50-50 in terms of more liquid items versus longer term investments. Next slide. Again, the takeaway from this slide is that we are maximizing our investments in Star Ohio while kind of letting our general operating account, we're monitoring it closely every week or two to make sure that we have money to cover payroll and those kind of things. But you can see the blue is the more current, so we're trying to keep as much money as we can in Star Ohio as long as we can. Next slide takes that general ledger total, the 212 million, and shows how it's allocated on our financials in terms of the general fund at 109 million, debt service, all the things, sinking funds and reserved in there for 73 million, and then you can see the other items. Grants, at this point, we're waiting on some reimbursements from the state, so that's why we have low or negative balances there. Next couple slides will be general fund cash balance. Slide 8. So this, if you looked at last month, it's pretty much similar. Looking back over the 3-year period, our balances are obviously down. So it's not anything unexpected. It's what we are seeing in our current environment. The next slide is general fund 3-year cash balance history for the general fund. So as you can see, the peaks are when we get the tax revenue primarily, and then you'll see we're going to be deleting that or using up those funds as we get to January, and then we should be able to get tax advances in January. We do have debt payments coming up. Those will come out of the debt fund though, primarily because we've already transferred what's needed for that. Next slide is 3-year revenues by source. You can see revenues are a little down in the third column versus the second column. So we've got about 36% of our revenue so far. I mentioned on there the timing of the homestead and rollback. Every year there's going to be some timing issue, but last year we got that in September. This year we didn't get it till October. So since our cutoff was September 30th, there's some timing difference there. That's the main difference. Next slide is that revenue by month. Like I just mentioned, the peaks and valleys there. The next slide is the expenditures by type. So you can see our expenditures continue to grow each year. And so one of the big things I noticed in looking at expenditures with timing with transportation, we have had a pretty significant extra amount of payment this year through September. So I don't know how much of that is carryover expenses, paying items on time and all of those things.
Could I ask about that? I mean, we usually close the year and there's millions of dollars that have not been paid regarding our transportation vendors. Are we watching that be corrected? Is that part of, are we more current? Who's watching to make sure that the payment to the vendors is current rather than the catch up at the end of the year?
So we did do some contracts at the beginning of this year to pay off stuff from prior year. And those were
Yes.
separate
And that's
contracts
been true
on
annually
purpose.
for years.
Yes, trying to get a good reset. So that's why we did them as separate contracts. So we could say this is last year's, this is current year's, to try to get a better idea of current year. The other thing that we're doing, and you probably saw the email I sent about the treasury report, there are some new transportation contracts in. We really worked with Director Williams and Mr. Burkhart to kind of change how we code those contracts. And it's one of those things where a lot of times on an individual contract, you have different lines. And what we would find at the end of the year, we would have one line that had almost no spending, and another line was completely spent out. And so we decided to do more of a proportional arrangement for the year, and then we can clean it up at the end of the year. But it allows those contracts to be spent easier to keep us up to date. Like what would happen is you would get an invoice, you would have enough, say, general student money on the contract left, but you had used up all of your charter school money. So then we'd have to go and try to find, add additional funds to the contract for the charter schools. So we're hoping this change kind of equalizes that spending, keeps us from getting behind with the vendors, because I know, and historically we've had those issues where we've gotten behind the vendors and had to scramble. So we're going forward with this new plan. We're monitoring it. We have one of our best accountants for this kind of stuff, meets with them on a monthly basis. They're one of the folks that we, most groups we review every quarter. They're one of the groups that's on the monthly review. We go in monthly, look at everything, look at where they're at, make sure we have lots of touch points.
Because there really won't be any extra money toward the end of this year to
No.
fix something that,
This year is going to be tight.
yes. Go ahead, Kev.
Sure. The next slide, again, is expenditures by month, and what makes that move is whether we have a 3-pay month, 2-pay month. is really the biggest differences there.
Does anyone have a particular affinity for this slide? This one is one we've discussed dropping.
Okay.
Because it's really tells you, it's really, is there a 2-slide month, a 2-pay month, or a 3-pay month? That's
I think maybe like a once or twice a year type of
Once-
deal.
yes.
And the only reason I say that though is there may be times where we have seen over a period of time is that like there would be something that happens 1 month for whatever weird reason. But I don't think we need to see it monthly. Like I
Okay.
think
Fair.
Maybe we'll put this on a
Cross is
quarterly.
okay with that too.
We'll
You know, I
evaluate.
do love my graphs and charts though, but
It's just this
you can
graph,
drop this one if you want.
this graph
or-
doesn't
Or
really,
do it less frequently.
it doesn't vary all that much, so.
We'll look at it as we put together
You
next
tell
month.
us when we need to see it.
Awesome. Next slide is, again, just tracking the unencumbered budget. So again, things that aren't encumbered, just identifying what that is. Again, and we've said this before, there are things that don't have to go through the encumbering process. For instance, tuition expenses that are paid through state foundation, we just record those as direct payments. So some of that, it's never going to be zero, but what we like to see is the trend moving towards getting all of those encumbered, so that we're not at the end of the year, with surprises, I guess I would say. So compared to last year, at this point, it was 44 million. This year, it's 33 million. So I think we're a little ahead. And as we've said over the years, depending on if it's temporary appropriation and how long to when we get the permanent, that can affect that percentage as well. Next slide is Mike's slide.
Yes, we are in the portion of the year where we burn through cash. I will say, as Kevin mentioned, we did get the homestead rollback, so that'll help our cash. That's what, about 14 million? I remember,
Between general
and debt services, so that's nice. Couple negatives on there just to explain, because people always are like, why are there negatives? When we do the property tax settlement, so we get advances always get put into general property tax. That's where they get recorded, and then when the settlement comes, we move some to tangible property, we move some to some other lines. So that's why there's a negative in general property taxes. It just means the settlement came in and we had to put money in the tangible personal property line. So, because advances are kind of an estimate. So here's an estimate, what you get, settlement tells you where to put it. The other negative is under capital outlays, which is kind of a good thing. So grants team was able to charge some expenses to the Perkins grant for Career Tech. Yeah, to make sure we're spending the federal funds and not spend some general funds. So that's, I will call that a
Spend
good,
them while we have them.
spend them while we have, I'll call that a good negative. So
That's a good negative.
All right.
I think this is a great chart, cash flow chart. It's really good, really important. So thank you. Technically, are we cash basis accounting until the end of the year?
technically
Yes.
we are cash basis accounting and then we do our annual report
Right.
and it's accrual.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Our Business Plus system has some functionality that you can do liabilities and, but officially state level, we are cash basis until we do the annual report. So the next few slides are preschool. This one just shows all funding sources. Since I just had the first 2 months of the year, I compared it to the first 2 months of last year, and you can see from August to September, we pick up about 250 students in terms of as that enrollment grows. So that trend continues. We've talked a lot about the EC grant seats, and they still have those additional seats, but so some of the funding pots are moving a little bit this year. But we'll continue to monitor that. The next slide is the number of students receiving tuition assistance and the calculation for that, which the tuition assistance is tied back to the levy dollars.
The number of students that it's somehow being out and about, talking about the renewal, if the numbers of students regarding receiving assistance, if you guys would just have like a paragraph to put together, I mean, the chart works great, but if you can, that would help the talking points, because that does get asked. How many kids are getting subsidy and,
So that would probably be something good to work with Ms. Brooks.
that'd be great, yeah, whatever.
Because we kind of see it from the flyover level.
Right, for
and-
next week, because there's a lot of having to go and sell the levy next week too. But that's one of the few questions that's been asked, Mr. Craig.
So I think one of the things we have talked about with the grants and other things that are ways to pay is that question mark of like where we are with the total number of students served by preschool programming. And so it's maybe more of a superintendent question actually, but are we at capacity at our facilities? Because I think that's the other thing that sometimes we have to be able to say, is even if our number like to date is lower, that may be also in part because our ability to service may have changed based on other things. But I guess I'm wanting to make sure that we're at capacity or at least near capacity.
I believe we still have some space available in certain locations. So definitely, if you know families who are interested in enrolling their 3 or 4-year-old, we would love to have that conversation.
I think that'd be something else that would be helpful to maybe have like some of those places where we see opportunities to still enroll for additional students. Whether it's some way of communicating out or those things for us. I say that also in part because I know that Kevin has done a great job of trying to remind us each time that like, yes, the number is different, but there's a reason the number is different. But there's also some underlying things that might be about like, this location just has always been under, right? Or this location's had capacity, this other location is well over capacity, and how do we balance some of those things out also to make sure that the total number gets at least closer every year to being kind of a consistent, month to month, week, or reflecting back on the past year that we're not having some dramatic drop, because it's the other part to some of the conversations we've had around the levy is that this idea that we've expanded out preschool opportunities, and then I worry sometimes that if we say at preschool numbers drop 150 students, is that reflective of the grants? Is that reflective of just not as many parents knowing about a particular publication, or if it's reflective of something else?
Some of the best numbers on preschool, I think one of the things that Shara says is the percentage of the kids that would be eligible, percentage of them from the pool that are actually in preschool, whether it's us or the private providers, is pretty impressive from a standpoint of where it started, and also considering how few preschool opportunities there are outside of what we're doing. The other piece is that it became obvious when we made some cuts, when we kind of had to consolidate some of our preschool sites to save some money because of staffing, and that's come up once, at least in the last week and a half too, that you actually, weren't you cutting, and we were consolidating, we're serving the same number of students, but for financial reasons, we had to not necessarily do what we've been doing, which is trying to have one at a site, a class at every site and what have you, so. People follow this, they follow it, and this hopefully will.
And Ms. Bolton, one
Yes.
reason for that, at one point, we talked about opening a preschool Montessori classroom at Vine, but then decided to pull back on that. So there's a variety of reasons why.
Yeah, you're right, that you can almost see the streams of conversation, or to your point, threads of conversations. Go ahead.
Great. The last slide in that section, well, no, there's 2 more slides, shows the number again with the tuition assistance only, and all the things we just talked about. And then the next slide shows the initial budget versus the year-to-date actual. So there was the first United Way payment, which is typically a quarterly payment. There's a payment schedule I believe was just recently approved, or soon, I think it was recently approved, that breaks that down. But we anticipate about 9.4 million being provided to United Way, which is directly out of the levy the levy dollars, including carryover. And then that's it for that section. You want to go ahead and do this or wait for this?
You can do that if you want.
Feds.
So this is my section. The quarterly spending report is
Oh,
the
yeah.
next item. So there's a letter size paper in there with green highlight on it. I like green highlight for money.
Money, that's all right, that's good. That's branding, that's
Of course,
branding.
this is expenditure, so, you know, I really like green for revenue. But anyway, so this takes general fund and rolls up all the BUD units, and it looks at it by just object level. So for instance, the first line is regular certificated salary. The budget, the working budget is 260 million. Through the quarter, we'd spent approximately 70 million, which is about 27%. So we're 25% through the year, we've spent 27%. So just to give you an idea of how those the calculation shows up there. When you get into the other categories like purchase services, it already includes encumbrances. So that percentage is gonna be a little bit different.
Wonky.
Yeah, because we've encumbered 20%, and we've spent 25%. And then there's the far column on the right, there's about 4 lines that I added a notation, you know, termination benefits are up at this point, so that's an item that probably have to make an adjustment in the budget. The other ones are really just, we keep a contingency there for salary savings, so that shows up as a negative on the budget. But overall, again, for all of the lines, the spending was at about 26.8% at the end of September.
Is that a lot this early, or that's normal?
I think that's pretty normal. Certainly, we wouldn't have had hourly salaries, you know, in August, July, August. And then the same thing will happen in June, where some of those hourly employees won't be paid. So it's all, if you're just looking at salaries, that's kind of going to be a moving target in that sense. And again, like with transportation, some of it is just timing. But I think in comparison to where we were last year, I think that's pretty well on track, so.
Okay.
So we try to do this on a quarterly basis. So since that was mine, I wanted to go ahead and cover that.
That's great.
And then you post that on the website as part of our reports on the website?
Yes, we will do that.
I think our next is
Feds?
state and federal, huh? Feds? Feds? Feds. I love it, feds.
All right, I'm Nan Hangood. I'm the State and Federal Programs Manager, here to talk about state and federal grants as quickly as I can. Next slide. All right, so we're gonna kind of wrap up last year and then finally present some data on this year. So it's kind of look a little bit repetitive, but we're kind of in our transition
Good riddance,
period.
goodbye.
So this is kind of our almost final wrap-up for fiscal year '25. Because of the extension on the consolidated related to the political issues, these are not actually our final numbers, because we did have an extra, we're going to try to have that finished by the end of this month, but we did get an extension on the major consolidated grants, but this should be pretty close to the final numbers. We've just been paying out some final POs during October.
Okay.
And so I did want to point out, you know, it looks like we're kind of flat, just from 83% to 83%. One reason for that is because these numbers always reflect actual spending and encumbrances. And so during this last couple months, we've been trying to close out POs, figure out what still needs to be paid and what doesn't. So even though we're still wrapping up our final spend, we're also closing out POs that have been showing up as encumbrances all year that have kind of little remaining balances. And so that's why it kind of looks flat. I did add the total just so you can kind of have a tracking to see overall where we're at. So our total allocations for all of our grants were 72 million, and at 9:30 we were at 60 million, just to kind of, you know, the percentages don't really put it in a full perspective. So the difference is primarily things that'll go to carryover and that we're still paying out. All right, the next slide. So this is just kind of where we ended up with fiscal year 25 funds. Our target is always set at 85%. That kind of reflects the Title I carryover limit of 15%, but we apply it to all of our grants, and we're very close to that. I think we'll probably end the year right about 83% because we don't have that much that we're still paying out, just a few lingering things. So during September, we were mostly working with principals on getting Title I budgets in place for the year because of the delays again and finishing the reports that were due that did not have an extension. And then our final payout, we were able to, I think, do a really good job on avoiding sweeps this year. We basically
Excellent.
had no sweeps for the first time in years. We had, like, in total of all the FERs we submitted, it was $710.86, just, random fringes and stuff. We had a little bit only in the adult education fund grant, the Aspire grant, because basically that one's kind of a challenge. It's mostly salaries, it's 85% salaries and benefits, and really the enrollment is unpredictable because we just don't know how many, parents are going to get involved in that program. So we did have a little bit of a sweep in that, but less than last year. And again, that one's a little bit harder to kind of control.
That's great news.
So kudos to everybody that was involved, every department basically contributed to that.
It was alarming a couple of years ago when we had to say, yes, we've been underspending our grant dollars. That was not a good moment in finance when that had to be said.
So, we might have one just final slide, but basically we're going to put fiscal year 25 to rest for us, and because we're already into fiscal year 27, I don't want to be in 3 years. So this is our first spending slide, next slide, for this year's federal and state grants. We're off to a little bit of a slow start, again, because of all the delays with applications getting approved and funds getting released. So we are a little bit below last year. We ended up continuing to spend some fiscal year 25 money rather than diving into 26 money. So that's why we're a little bit lower. We did add the target line just to make it a little bit, more visual of what our target is. One thing to note is now we've dropped off, 22, 23. So this slide now is kind of presenting the results of the current grant team. So now we're kind of in a position of trying to beat our own performance into our own era. And we might take a look at even our target line and see if it's still appropriate.
You dropped on the 22, 23, did you say?
Yeah, and so that was, now we're moving, we're doing it on a 3-year basis kind of. And so, we might want to look at our own goals and see if we want to increase those, or change our targets.
Important. Good.
So, anyways, we're off to a little bit of a slow start, but they're definitely spending. Next slide. So our goal was only 17%. So even with those delays, we are on target with spending. Schools are definitely, out there getting their contracts in. We had a lot of summer spending, especially at the district level on curriculum and things like that were kind of high dollar spending. Any questions so far? All right, the next slide. Again, this is just by our major consolidated grants, where we're at on spending. I think we're really off to a good start. Again, considering the delays, there's always a lot of concern with SSI and expanding opportunities. We're always getting letters about that, but I think we've got a solid plan in place this year to make sure those funds are spent efficiently. And that's pretty much it. The next slide, one thing I'm going to try to do this year, tentatively, if you guys like the idea, is kind of focus each month on kind of a new one area of spending or one particular grant, just to get, the education and information out there, and kind of just focus in on one particular thing. And so this month I chose the non-competitive supplemental school support grant, the SSI grant, Fund 536. It goes by a lot of different monikers. There's a lot of interest right now in the monies the schools get and how they're spending it, especially going into the fiscal year 27 budget and trying to project and plan. And so I just wanted to focus for a minute on that particular grant. We also get a lot of, attention on that at the state level. And so a couple things I want to point out about the supplemental support grant. It is awarded directly to schools. including the amounts that the school gets. It's not like regular Title I where we get a lump sum and we decide how much each school gets. The state gives a specific amount to the schools that are selected each year. So that's notable. It's based on the school being identified as having an area of improvement. It is an entitlement grant sort of, but the state decides, if we're entitled to it. And they do that based on the report cards and their targets, which basically focus on bottom 5% of performance, graduation rates, absentee rates. And then they can also identify a specific subgroup, which might be like MLL or students with disabilities. And so kind of one thing that I want to dispel is kind of the idea in spending that it's not just an extension of Title I and we can spend it all any way we want. The state is very clear, like we're giving you this money because we've identified that your graduation rate is below 67%, and we want you to try to fix that with this money. And so it's not just, again, like, oh, we've got a bunch of money, let's go spend it. It's supposed to be very targeted towards the reason we received those funds. And this group at the state level is very involved in, monitoring that. And so it involves, more specific planning than basic Title I. The next slide. And so this particular year, these are the 4 priorities that ODU identified. And if you look through those, literacy, ELA and mathematics, safe and supportive environments, and workforce readiness, these 4 targets at the state level, fall right into line with our one plan goals. I mean, they basically read almost like our one plan goals that we've identified ourselves to focus on in the schools. So the state is very much in alignment, with the same kind of priorities that we've already identified as well in our one plan. And again, these are what they consider priorities for student success for these funds. And then lastly, Mike, I think had suggested that we provide this information. There seems to be, a lot of kind of confusion or misunderstanding in the schools of why do I get this money or why don't I get the money? Am I going to get it? Am I not going to get it? And how much am I going to get each year? So this is just like a 6-year history of these funds coming to the schools because we do depend on them to reach our goals. And we've seen that they do have a major impact on schools, improving their report card status and, leaving identified targets. And a couple interesting things is you can see, like, there's not a fixed amount, like you're identified and you get this amount. What the state kind of does is they have a certain amount of money. They set their categorical, targets of how you're going to be identified. And then, they divide it out. So they don't really know until they figure out how many schools fit within, under 67% graduation, how much you're going to get each year. So it can vary widely. So like this year, we only have 4 schools still getting it. They ended up getting $259,000 per school because so many states or schools have dropped out. Last year, when we had 14 schools or 15 schools receiving it at the highest level, they received $149,000 per school. So the amount can vary significantly from year to year, which makes it difficult to budget because we can't just say, like, if you're CTSI, you're going to get $100,000 and we can make a plan. You really don't know until the state distributes it over the entire
If I could
state.
interrupt on that, this is what we mentioned at the retreat, correct?
Yeah, this is the number of schools that have achieved out of this program. So, going from 32 to 15 to 4.
Well, that's cool. No, is there a list of the schools that were?
I can share that list with you. So this year, it's kind of interesting. It's really kind of our, not really alternative schools, but this year it's GDA, virtual, Owens, and West High. So it is schools, and they mainly are identified based on graduation rate and absenteeism this year are the targets. And you can probably kind of understand why those schools would have some issues with those particular targets, because of the uniqueness of some of those schools and their student body. But yeah, you can see, over the years, and the reason there's a change even between like 14 to 23, it doesn't mean between 22 and 23. That doesn't mean all of our schools got worse. Every couple of years, every 3 years, they determine a new set of criteria. They re-identify schools. So it might be between 22 and 23, without doing research. Maybe, you know, in 22, it was a graduation rate below 65%, and then the next time it was a graduation rate below 45%. So they change their criteria in each budget planning cycle. And so you can see in this last 3-year cycle, we did have, you know, vast improvement from 32 to 15 to 4, and now there's a new cycle starting. So that does indicate that we're using these funds for the right reasons, that we're focusing on the things that we should be focusing on and trying to fix those problems. And so now there's a new cycle starting in January. We'll have new criteria, new schools identified, and new dollar amounts. And we really don't have any way to predict that right now because they're still trying to come up with their own priorities and metrics.
And when does that happen? That
They said they're working on it now, and we're hoping to know the schools towards the end of January. But we have really no idea, you know, which schools or what the dollar amount's going to be, because it depends on where they set their bars, what they set as their target priorities for performance. So it's just, I kind of just wanted to really explain why it's such a kind of complicated grant, and just, you know.
Well, presented correctly, this is a great marketing tool, frankly.
And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Great.
So I want to thank you for providing this information specifically with this grant, because I know it's been a source of conversation with the board. And I think it is worthwhile to also, for us maybe to highlight it at a future board meeting, the 3-year cycles there, because I think that's the other part that we probably have not done the greatest part about discussing.
Right, one more thing.
Is that you may go through a 3-year cycle where you suddenly look like you're doing so much better based on the numbers, feeling great about it, and then the next cycle comes in, and it may be a reason they do it, and maybe, you know, we want the benefit of the dollars in some ways, but we also, it has a, I don't want to say a stigma, but it has a kind of connotation to receiving the funds, that it's hard to explain to the public, like, yeah, we actually did great, and they changed the criteria because we did so great, right? Or we did great, other folks were not, and so they had to change criteria, that's why even fewer. But I guess maybe the question from us is a longer term path with this specific fund. 3 of those 4 schools are likely to be the schools that we're going to always have a challenge with getting graduation numbers up to a point, or getting these other measurables up to a point where they're going to meet and follow the same path as some of our other schools, but we may see them grow. Is there any way to track how we compare to what the standard is for those remaining schools, right? So like, if, for instance, if we come in next year and they create a new system and it's still around the same basis, so we only have those 4, are we able to track kind of growth at those 4 or opportunities in those 4 to try and push them closer to getting off of the list? I guess is maybe.
I mean, yeah, the state uses, you know, basically report card measures in addition to some other things. There is the lag, so I think I had noted, you know, like this year's awards were based on the 24 report card, so there is also a lag between the data they're using, just like Title I allocations, because they have to get the data and then work with it. So there is, you know, a little bit of a lag that even like last year, they might have come up, but they were identified based on 24 report cards. But certainly, I believe those are metrics. Johnny, you could speak to that, but they're all metrics that we track.
I was only going to share, for example, I know West Ties is because of graduation. So because of that lagging, yes, we can get an idea of that. The others is because of performance. And so we can even compare them to where we are. What was our lowest PI per school as a bar, to see how we can get there.
I just think it'd be really helpful in some ways of, if the criteria changed and we suddenly now had 10 schools or 12 schools, being able to explain both the criteria changed and that the schools actually been improving.
And
This is the
based on,
path.
It's important.
One of
I'll
the,
just-
I'm sorry, Nan.
I just want to add, like, just to be clear, because that's probably going to happen, because this state support team is very active. It's a new state support team that's really focused on this grant and these metrics. And we fully anticipate for next year, and so everybody doesn't overreact, that there's going to be more schools and less money per school. They've already told us that, because basically across the state, schools have dropped out, and that's why each of these schools got such a large amount of money, because everybody's, spending their money towards these targets. So I fully, anticipate, without knowing which schools, that we're going to see a much larger number of schools, which a much lower amount per school. And then I would just like to add that I forgot to mention, the EOEC funds, Expanding Opportunities for Each Child funds, follow the same allocation process. Even though they have different targets, they are the same identified schools and the same award process and the same team, but we use them differently. So I think these are a little more of interest. Sorry to interrupt you,
I think
Sean.
there was board interest in knowing more about this at the retreat. We kind of rushed, but I think there was interest. Any other questions, comments? Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, yes, we have 2 CRA agreements submitted as written. How about that?
Oh. How close are we to signing anything with the city, since we're currently boxing with them?
There is a meeting scheduled. I know legal counsel Hoying has a meeting set up. It's in the next 2 weeks. I don't recall the exact date. It's hard enough to remember where I need to be today, but I know there is a meeting, and he believes this will be
The last meeting?
the last or the second to last meeting on that. And we think we're close.
Okay. People.
Okay. I think the next thing on the agenda is actually the foundation financial reports. So you have it in your packet. I don't think, it might be a slide, it's not a slide for it, but I think it's up there. Scam Likely's calling me. So we did
Oh,
ask.
wait, was that the monthly fund activities thing? Is that the thing? Is
No,
that
he
the
did
chart that
that.
has the working budget on it?
No,
Okay.
that's just something we submit every month, and
Okay,
generally don't dwell on it unless there are questions.
nope,
Okay.
I don't have it.
So next, like I said, next item is review of the foundation financial reports. So that's this document. So Kid Future was, as part of the MOU, they're supposed to submit to us financial reports quarterly. This was their first crack at it. Had some conversations with their financial team. We'll probably add some detail going forward. The thing to note, one, this is just kind of the Kid Future Foundation part of their business. So if we go back to thinking about their business model, the 3 lines, this is just the Kid Future line. That one confused me as well when I first looked at it. But it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the high level is they're at a positive financial position through the first quarter. So expenditures are a little under where they would be. Revenue was a little under, but they had some revenue they recognized in a prior fiscal year that really counts for it. So all in all, I didn't have any questions. I am going to ask, I think a couple things that I believe that the board would be interested in. So not to speak for the board, but just kind of doing is,
You are our emissary.
I am,
You were the
yes.
superintendent,
Yes,
so-
not to speak for the board. I know the program disbursements line under expenses. I asked for some narrative of what that is, because I think people would be
Yes.
interested in seeing where money's going, and especially the stories behind that, the narrative behind that. Hey, they're using money for this great thing for our kids. And then I asked for the admin expenses to be broken down one category
Okay,
so that they match our high-level categories. And that's how we did the budget when we worked with the budget at the beginning of this year for them. So just getting those 2 things back. I would anticipate next quarter, the reports will look like that, and we should be good.
and next,
Next is the deep dive from the retreat. So slide 30, actually, I guess 39, Rob, is where we're at. So I don't know, Chief Audit Executive Havercost, if you want to go first. I think the first item from the retreat would be our evaluations. So do
Let
you
me,
want-
let me
Go ahead.
just preface
Yes.
all of that. I asked these two folks as a follow-up to the retreat and the dialogue that occurred there, is my understanding from that dialogue at the retreat, that they talked about the evaluations, we briefly talked about the evaluations, and I think we left it with the fact that it would be going to policy, but that, as I recall, what Ben suggested too, that they come to us first and we send recommendations. And so that's what we're doing, because we want to expedite both of these as quickly as we can. And we are also very trusting of both of these people to be much more demanding on themselves than we probably can be, which is why they're who they are and why we have them. So that's my reasoning.
I would defer to Mrs. Havercost.
Sadie.
Thank you. So mine is just slide number 49. And I summarized the slides that I shared with the board at the retreat on Saturday. And my takeaway in understanding from the board conversation is that we were comfortable with the current arrangement of the audit committee performing the evaluation. However, I think we can be a bit more formal and intentional in bringing a resolution forth to the board to approve at the July timeframe my goals, and we could even layer in the audit plan, and then via resolution formally adopting the mid-year and annual evaluations. My understanding of our current board policy that there would be no amendments needed or changes needed at this time. So more than happy and open to consider any other suggestions you all have, though.
Sounds good.
We love it.
Unfortunately, I will not be that quick.
And unfortunately, we knew that would be the case.
All right, so reuse some slides from Saturday, but just for the public.
Sure.
So evaluation of the treasurer is built into ORC 3313, and then board policy 1330 corresponds to that. And that establishes the March 1st deadline. If you go to the next slide, as we've discussed, March 1st doesn't really correspond with any activities that a treasurer would be responsible for.
Of course.
And so there's some dates out there. I added a few actually from the retreat. July would tell you how I did with the budget process. September would have you data of how I did with closing the prior fiscal year. October would give you data on how well, Ms. Haygood's team and I work together on state and federal grants. November, if we're talking about, levies and getting new money. January is probably a really good one in that, the audit is done at that point, or at least we know the results. We don't always have them published at that point. The ACFR is done. Also, the payroll and tax year is closed. So those are all things. Other considerations, try not to overlap with the superintendent's evaluations, because I think doing both of them at the same time will monopolize all of your executive session time, and other time.
That might not be a bad idea, actually. Just talk about those two.
Talk about together, just doing together, yeah. Just alternating or
Saves us from talking about other things.
that is true.
But no, you're right.
Wanted to provide a midterm opportunity. Wanted to make sure you had data for the quantitative part. And the other thing that is something for me is, as all of my reports do their goals, we try to ladder. So it's important that the treasurer has goals that people can ladder to. So if I have a goal about the newsletter, for example, and getting the final newsletter out, that's something that Cody and Kevin might take as their goals for their evaluations, because they're going to be directly working in that work. So all that to say, I don't have a great date. January is probably the best date, but it creates other issues. So one of the issues personally for me is, I'm going to have a short period and a long period, no matter how we do this. If we change the date off of March, it's going to be a short and a long. And don't want to miss an evaluation period.
No,
So
we're not doing that again.
So we need to think through that. So I would ask the board, or ask the committee, and kind of your feedback on what is, based on this discussion, what is a good natural date for an evaluation?
Mr. Crossett, Mr. Craig, they're our experts. Go
I,
ahead.
I think the January date looks very appealing to me. And if you want to have a mid-year review opportunity, I think it could be July with the budget. So that's about 6 months apart. And
Okay.
I think that would work well. That would be my view of what you've presented. Thank you.
Reaction to that before we go to Mr. Craig?
No, I like that. I appreciate that from a CFO to a CFO.
There you go.
The only thing I would think about is maybe doing completed by the end of January. And the only reason I say that is that we would technically not have the annual audit report until some point in that month of January. And I think that's going to be part of the criteria of things that you're going to have to do each year. We would be measuring that you did it the last year if we started at the beginning. But I think that's not dissimilar from what we kind of did with the superintendent was saying that we know the numbers come out early October, late September, so we would by no later than this date in that month. So I think the 31st is, by no later than the 31st of January, we would have done a review. The only thing I would say for this year, also in that line too, is that maybe what we then would do is evaluate what you've done to get yourself prepared in the transition, more so than we would do evaluating.
10% kind of thing, or?
Yeah, but I think realistically saying what we're gonna evaluate this year is, have you done the stuff to get yourself prepared in your transition and taken over the certain roles and that type of deal, as opposed to necessarily measurable outcomes that we would do for the next years. And the only reason I say that is because I don't know that we'll have a measurable outcome that we're supposed to, like a quantitative measurable outcome that we would do for you in 3 months on the job. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought probably this first one is gonna be kind of perspective. You'll have to look at what I've done to this point and like you said, kind of project. Like is he on track? If from where he is to here, is he on track to hit these goals?
I do think, and again, I think January, and then I think maybe late August, early August, late July makes sense for doing the midterm, because that would have been right after we would have closed the budget in that process. So I think that type of deal, but doing it in early August is more likely because the board doesn't meet much in July. So that first meeting in August might make sense to do it then, because that's actually probably more likely when we will have a meeting. And especially if the budget and finance committee is supposed to provide some input in that as well.
I thought you were gonna say if the budget takes too long. So
No.
I was like, stop.
If we're supposed to make a decision on it and we
We
don't
have
meet,
so little money, this is gonna be a pretty quick thing, I think.
but if we're supposed to make a decision on it and we don't meet,
Yes,
or something
You're
happens.
right, that's practical.
that is very
You
practical.
might
I
wanna be
agree.
the 6 month, but practically speaking, it's gonna be early August.
Yeah, I would try to avoid the 1 meeting months. So to avoid July and avoid December because, okay.
So what are our recommendations? Shall we,
January 31st and the first meeting in August.
Yeah, I think,
Or second
or maybe
meeting in August
mid-August.
so that so this committee can meet first.
Sure.
But I think we could have that, for the 31st, yes. For the midterm, we could say that you submit your midterm information to us no later than the end of July, like July 31st, so that then the board, so the committee would view it and then the board could view it by the end of August.
is that good?
Sure. And I would imagine what you're thinking is that this committee would do some preliminary review before the board.
Yep.
And that's going back to the old tradition that all works its way through finance. And the concept that obviously where the work is done is where the evaluation should occur, the same with the audit piece. And that makes sense. I do think we missed something I still think we missed something regarding the superintendent's evaluation because it worked so well that student achievement had a lot to do with it in a much greater depth than well, I can't count this last meeting when we were doing decimal points and goals, but there's something valuable to have the smaller group kind of help out a little bit. Are we going to recommend as a committee, send this over to policy with the things that you all have suggested? Can you write what has been
Yes.
determined, both of you, and it has the approval of the committee?
I
Ms.
just
Brandon?
want to add, I know you haven't covered the slide, but I wanted just to say it, that I thought the mapping the same scoring expectations to what the superintendent's scoring expectations were good for you, worked for me as well. So
Okay,
I think that part-
yes, for the
I
sake
like
of
it.
simplicity, for everyone who has to do the scoring, yes.
I think it makes sense, and I
Okay.
think that's good, and I don't know that it doesn't necessarily work for you, but it does work for the other two. I think that makes sense, and then also, that's all we have to do about what you have, except is there any, it wasn't for you, is there any policy rewrite regarding the treasurer? Because there's 3 or 4 policies specific to the treasurer. And it appears in the same area where the superintendent's is. So I would just think we might want to review that, or you review it, to see if there's any rewrite that is required there.
Yes, 1330.
Yes.
Says the annual evaluation no later than March 1st, based on the non-renewal. If you
by
look,
law.
if you look at how the superintendent's is written, I think a very similar change, because it says, it still keeps the non-renewal date for law, and then the next paragraph talks about the actual, so the actual process and dates. So I
So you
think,
might want to also add that to your
Okay.
particular
yep,
handoff, and we'll make sure that Ms. Davis has for the policy committee meeting that the evaluation treasurer and chief audit person, the chief, is on their agenda so that this can get done yet, immediately.
yes. That'd be good. I also, in your packet, and we don't have to take time with this, but I did another revision of my goals to
Yeah,
make them,
love it.
make them smarter with some more deadlines and timelines. They are not aligned to the new evaluation period. They're not, I mean, they're kind of natural goals of when things need to happen, but would appreciate feedback, and that can be individualized.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be here.
Budget one is a line.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the budget is, the budget target is what the budget target is, so.
Now, the superintendent has what I call high-stakes goals. Is there anything in here that puts you under the same kind of pressure of performance that the superintendent is held to?
I mean, the budget's a fairly high-stakes goal.
Okay.
Obviously, and building a revenue plan that matches the strategic plan is a high-stakes goal that has a hard deadline. Some of the other ones aren't as high stakes, I will say that.
Well, I think those are good, and so you might want to have some specificity to the 1 or 2 that are actually high stakes.
I think the dates are in it for June 30th, would be mid-year, and that'd be okay.
That's, okay, that's who that, well, they must have had some money, because I'm going to 2 different things with their names on it now. Federated, that could have been. Does anybody else have any more things on our agenda?
If I could take 2 minutes of
Please do.
the time. Go one more slide. So I wanted to follow up on the budget conversation. And if you think about the budget, and Rob kind of pushed through it, but the budget really is process plus data equals your budget, right? You establish a process, you put the data in, you get out a budget. Hopefully most people are happy with what comes out. So if you go to the next slide, I would like you, again, you can do this in writing, or we can do it now. I'd like each of you to complete this sentence. Get some feedback.
You probably should have done this as a, what do they call it, a breaker or something?
Icebreaker? Yeah,
Icebreaker.
that would have been a good one.
I'm happy to give you one now, but I would probably give you a better one if a later date.
I like that question.
But I think, from my perspective, the budget process will be a success if it is completed on time and on budget.
Completed on
So
time.
creative.
Woo.
Wow.
Told you it'd be more creative.
Yeah, again, there's always a chance to follow. What is
Well,
that?
that's always has been a challenge. We shouldn't discount it.
I mean, I'm right there with you, yes.
My answer to that would be, I don't know if I can wordsmith it correctly, but it's success if it maximizes the resources for student outcomes based on some ROI, return on investment analysis.
Cool.
All right, I'll give a slight caveat to my answer of on budget and on time and on budget, and is reflective of our values as a district. So I think that's the one thing that we.
Yeah, I didn't have to say on time and on budget, because Brandon already said.
Guys are
This
laddering
is
on
like
each other.
that, keep adding to it.
Yeah.
Mine would be the budget process will be a success if it continues to facilitate district growth.
They're all great answers.
We are so smart. This is like a pretty good group. It takes a long time to have these meetings, but we're pretty good.
No, I appreciate these value statements because it's important to get, we get a,
More, don't worry.
Yeah, we get-
Finance committee.
we get a lot of feedback, and so as we design processes or tools, we just want to keep coming back to those statements. I think they're very good, but it helps ground the people's work as we get into numbers and spreadsheets and which column do you fill out and all that stuff. Coming back to the value statements about the process is important.
Definitely will help the explanation.
Any other items for the order here? I do want to say on the budget process, I think that the finance committee throughout the process has to be very well informed and to build that into more of what we do. So that it's like we said at the end of last year, you want the finance committee to be pretty united about where they are, so then you only need to find that one other vote, at least to keep moving forward. The other piece is that, again, I will say, as I said before, and I'll say this in the presence of the president over there too, that we have to resolve, I think, where we are regarding our employees' salary and benefits much earlier than the spring, because we know that that has to be part of where we are. Because if we're going to have only the same amount of money, according to the projection, for the 3 years or whatever, then that has to be determined very early, because that's going to be only second to fixed and state minimums will be whatever it is we resolve with our employees. After that, then we can do a lot of figuring things out, but we can't wait. That can't be the end of the budget process when we're figuring out salaries and benefits. That's going to have to be, at least in my humble opinion, as an old teachers union person, and that has to be the first thing we try to decide. And we have to do it obviously in collaboration and through negotiations.
Yes, we have a reopener coming up next month.
That's right.
To
Well,
have
that's
that
what it's gonna
conversation.
have to be. And it can't take long. Are we ready to adjourn?
Motion and second.
If anybody says no, we're